Afternoon and welcome to the Committee on Higher Education. Today is Monday, April 17th. It's approximately 1:04 p.m. I think that clock is wrong. It says 12:04 p.m. We are in conference room 225. We are here to take up two governors' messages. And this meeting is being streamed live on YouTube. In the unlikely event that we must abruptly end this hearing due to technical difficulties, the committee will reconvene again to discuss any outstanding business at 1 p.m. on Thursday, April 20th in this room, 225. And a public notice will be posted on the legislature's website. For anyone participating remotely, your testifier audio will be muted and your video disabled until shortly before it's your time to testify. And you are limited, all testifiers, to 1 minute. At the end of the minute, the audio will be automatically muted. And if there are any temporary glitches during your turn to testify, we may have to move on to the next person due to time restraints. And we appreciate your understanding and remind you that the committee has your written testimony. Because we are doing audio and visual, we are limited to a certain amount of time and they will cut us off. So that's why we say that. With that, members of the committee, we have Senator Gil Kibagaran, Senator Kurt Favela as members, and Vice Chair Kidani will be in shortly. Senator Fukunaga will be excused. And with that, we want to go ahead and start. I will be calling on anyone wishing to give testimonies first, and then we will welcome the nominee to come up to give an opening remarks, and then we'll go into questions. So we will start off with GM 600 for consideration and confirmation to the Board of Regents of the University of Hawaii, gubernatorial nominee Laurel Liu for a term to expire 6/30/2027. Testifying, we had the Contractors Association of Kauai in support, and I don't believe they're here or on Zoom. Randall Moore in support in person.
Yes, I'm in support. I also need to say that I need to run to the doctor's appointment, so I'd like to say I'm also in support.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom Shigimoto, also an individual in support. I don't believe, is there anyone here wishing to testify for the nomination of Laurel Liu? If not, I'll invite Laurel to come up. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
If you would like to do any opening remarks?
I would just like to thank you for your time. As we all know, we are all proud of our university. My parents, my siblings, and my husband are all proud graduates of the university, and I'm here to support my community college on Hawai'i and the university system, which were the best years of my life. And probably the most beer I've ever drank at one time.
I know that you filled out a questionnaire that we passed out.
Yes.
We do that to all of the potential regent nominees. And would you like to just share a portion with the committee members? Just why do you want to be on the board? I know you've already been serving as an interim.
I've been serving. Yes, I will. Thank you, Senator Mercado Kim. My interest in the University of Hawaii Board of Regents really arose when I was a student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where during the last 2 years as an undergraduate, I was an editor-in-chief of Kaleo o Hawaii, which was a student newspaper. And I did graduate from there with a journalism degree. We, as student journalists, had the experience of being on the outside looking in on the activities of the administration, the regents, even have attended higher education committees as students, covering the university beat. So it was always an unusual situation to be on the outside, looking in, asking for information, and not receiving all that you had requested. And a lot has changed since then. It's been many decades since I graduated from there. But transparency has increased probably exponentially, I hope, since then. And I think we can all do better. So one of my goals is to expound on transparency on the part of the board. Another reason I am interested in the Board of Regents is as a per diem family court judge and the girls court family court judge on Kauai for 5 years, I have seen the effects of poverty, lack of education, drugs, and other scourges of society on our youth on Kauai. And I would like our children to have every opportunity to be able to attend community colleges or the university to better themselves. And I think that every student in Hawaii who wants a higher education should be able to get it. And that is one of my goals, to encourage our youth that if they want to go to college, they can.
Okay, and since you've been serving for the last, what, 4 months, perhaps since January? Right?
Yes.
In the interim, can you share with us what is the Board of Regents' top 3 priorities?
I think budget is one, improving the student experience. And to me, whether it's a top priority or not, it should be accessibility to our students in terms of tuition availability, wanting to go to the University of Hawaii.
Members, I want to open up to questions. I have a number of questions, but I'm going to go ahead. And because I don't know if I can back, so I'm going to have to speak up if you have a question.
I'll just give one question for now then. What have you learned thus far being an intern regent?
I've learned there's a lot of reading and there's a lot of budget tables that I probably need more help with to fully understand.
What do you hope to accomplish while being on the board?
My hope is, really my overarching goal is to try to let our youth know in Hawaii that if they want a college education, it will be available to them. And if they want a university education, the sky's the limit.
That's what I was getting back to you. Why do you believe you should be on the Board of Regents? What expertise can you bring to the board? Will you help address the issues that they currently facing?
I think one of the areas of expertise that I bring is that after I graduated from the University of Hawaii at Manoa with a journalism degree, I was a reporter for the Honolulu Advertiser for 5 years. So talk about transparency, right? That's what we were all about. But also my beat was the education beat. So I visited at that point every high school in the state of Hawaii except for Ni'ihau. And I had a weekly column on education, and I was very aware of public education needs. I also from time to time covered higher education. And I have an interest in public education. My family, as I said, was educated by the University of Hawaii. We are strong university supporters. And I want our residents to look toward the university as a beacon, as we did when we were growing up, and someplace to aspire to. Now, I think a lot of our kids either, on one hand, don't even bother to go to higher education or go away. I'd like them to have as their first consideration our university.
I want to ask you about the relationship or the role of the regents with the administration. And I know during our meeting, you shared with me that you thought the regents should govern on the larger policy issues and leave the day-to-day management to the staff. How should the regents handle issues and complaints regarding the day-to-day management? Like, for instance, the football coach debacle, or currently the athletic director selection committee. There have been a lot of concerns raised, and so how would the regents, or how do you think the regents should deal with this when in fact, the administration is not really addressing some of these day-to-day issues that are brought up by our students, by faculty, and by the community.
I think in almost every issue that might face the regents have a different perspective on issues than the administration might. I think the administration is a lot physically and maybe emotionally and psychologically tied to the campus, whereas I come from a faraway island, right? And my
Not that far.
constituents or the people who I speak to may have different opinions than the administration. So I think it's incumbent on the regents to voice their individual views and come to some kind of understanding with the administration as to what is a representative view of the community as a whole. And hopefully it jives with the university's policies or what's good for the university, and we can make a decision together. But I think the reason that the regents are there is to give that other commentary to any administration proposal.
Well, I certainly agree with you. But what happens when, and this happens all the time, is that those issues don't get put on the agenda for discussion. So I don't know when that takes place. The only reason why the legislature or the Senate got involved with the Todd Graham issue on the football coach was the students' parents had gone to the administration and it was not brought up. And so they came to us as a last resort and we had a hearing. And only after that hearing, things happened at the regions. And even then, it was like pulling teeth from what my understanding, what to put on the agenda and how much to let the public really opine. I'm not even sure that the athletic director selection committee makeup and the concerns that have been raised was even discussed by the Board of Regents, because when we look at the minutes, I don't see that on there. So how does the regents get to really hold the administration accountable if these issues are not actually brought up on the agenda? And I know that is the chair of the Board of Regents, that is the one that set the agenda, but shouldn't the members have input and these issues come up?
I think absolutely all the members should have input, and it's incumbent on them to be insistent if they feel if it's of importance to speak with the chair or even speak publicly during a board meeting. Certainly they're members of the public as well and can raise issues.
Okay, so will you be doing that when these issues come up?
If I
from
feel
time to
there is an
time?
issue of importance that my colleagues are not addressing, I would be more than happy to.
Because, yeah, I mean, I don't like to have hearings on some of these issues, when in fact it should be the Board of Regents that hold these hearings. And the Board of Regents be the one to question the administration. But we have found over the years that when the administration fails to act and the Board of Regents fail to hold them accountable, then we bring it up and then we're accused of micromanaging, of interfering, of bullying, again, so it's really frustrating on our part because the people call us, the constituents call us, students call us, faculty call us. And I know, and I've spoken to Board of Regents and Board Chairs saying, well, we don't hear that information. They don't tell us. And part of the reason is they don't trust the regents to be able to feel comfortable in bringing up this information. So that's the dilemma we're in. And I'm hoping with board members that they will be less passive and more aggressive as to having some of these issues discussed openly for the sake of the students and the community.
I hear your concern.
The other question I have about whether or not enough oversight is being exercised by the Board of Regents. I know we shared with you this governance, a new era. And on page 16, it's Governance for a New Era, a blueprint for higher education trustees, just so public can understand what I'm talking about. On page 16, it says boards should include on their agenda a regular executive session which permits appropriate confidential discussions solely among members of the board. However, it's my understanding that the president sits in on these executive sessions and even sits in on his evaluation session. So do you feel that the board can objectively evaluate the president or speak openly when the president or the administration is there in your executive sessions, other than those which require perhaps him to have input, but in other sense not be included in these executive sessions?
So I actually advise as general counsel another board of directors that has a chief operating officer where we do an annual evaluation. And in that evaluation, that person does sit in on executive session to answer questions of the directors, but is then excused so that the board can discuss in private compensation and other issues. So I imagine that is how most boards should be doing their evaluations of their chief executive officers.
Okay, so is that a practice that you will,
That is a practice that I personally adopt.
okay, is that one that you're going to request that?
I cannot imagine doing an executive session without excusing the subject of the executive session.
So after the questions are asked, then any discussion among the board members should take place without the person being there.
I think
Is that
that should be standard policy
Okay.
for every CEO.
Okay, my understanding is that's not what's happened in the past. So
I would encourage that as a practice. If it's not.
That's good. That's good to hear. Thank you. Members, I'm gonna stop now. Anybody else want to jump in and ask any questions? Okay,
First of all, Ms. Lou, thank you very much for being willing to serve. I mean, sometimes this can be a thankless job because I'm sure when you bring up these issues, you will probably be looked at as a bully also. But my concern, and I think the members of the committee, the concerns that we had is really for the well-being of the students, the reason the university is there. And the well-being includes making sure that they are getting the services that they deserve, the courses that they deserve at a price that they deserve. And that some of the things and the prices that the tuition that is being driven up is because of some of the policies that the university has in place. And one of the big issues that we have mentioned time and time again is that the professors are not teaching their full courses. So we pay another professor to do the other part of the courses they're not teaching. And then we also have grad students. So I think this whole practice has to be looked at to make sure that they whatever we're paying the professors, and you know, they deserve a good pay, but they should also fulfill their commitment to teach the courses that and the credits that they are required to teach. And so that's one of the things that I hope you will involve yourself in and look at.
Thank you. Understood.
I have a question.
Senator.
So just in the context of the three committees you serve on right now on the board, what's your philosophy of shared governance among stakeholders in the university, students, faculty, and general administration, and where exactly does the legislature fit in? Because I think the questions you're getting is, at what point is the legislature supposed to be getting involved, since you know we actually have as constituents the same people that are stakeholders in the university?
I think the best way I can answer your question is, while I believe that the regents have the final authority over the running of the university, I believe it is our university. And I know members of this committee and many people sitting in this room have been or are students or graduates of the university. I take great pride in the university and being a graduate. I never went away to school. I stayed at the university and at Richardson Law School because I wanted to stay in Hawaii. And I want other young women from Kauai, from Hilo, from wherever they may be, other young people to be able to look at that university as their university. They, their parents, their neighbors, I think we're all responsible for making our university the university, just like we're responsible for making our youth healthy, our beaches healthy, our environment better. We're all in this together, and we got to pull together.
But how do you make their input meaningful is my question.
How do I make
How do you make their input meaningful?
the legislature's input meaningful?
No, I'm the stakeholders in the university, students, faculty. And
Well-
again, in the context of the three committees you have, I mean, you're gonna be in budget and finance, the audit, and then the planning and facilities.
Well, you have regions from every island. You have a student region and you have public access. Whether we can do better, I think we all can do better in our jobs in listening to the public.
But well, are you saying it's gonna be a spoil system then? So if the region from Maui wants a facility, they're gonna get a facility?
Not until Kauai gets it first. I think, we all have to make,
You can talk to the president about that.
that's an easy sell. This world today is not what it was when I grew up and when I went to university. Things have changed, and not much for the better, if you ask me. We have so many social problems. There are so many economic problems in Hawaii. We can't fix them all, but if we look to the university as a beacon of excellence, if we allow the faculty to flourish, if we allow our students to attend and be the best that they can be, how can we not give that to them without our policymakers supporting the university and our university administrators striving to be better? I think we're all in it together, Senator, and if I didn't feel that way, I probably wouldn't be here. But I think our society has been difficult for many sections of Hawaii, and economically, socially, it's tough for a lot of people to go to college and go to university. And a lot of us are in a position of privilege where we have food in the refrigerator, we have a roof over our house, we have money in the bank. We've got to be able to extend that to everybody, whether it's our homeless or our drug addicted youth or our unemployed or underemployed people. If we don't all make, I hate to use this phrase, but a paradigm shift in working together and making Hawaii a better place, as I'm sure all of you are doing in your jobs, we might as well just go home.
My question was, how do you make those voices meaningful so that they actually matter in the decisions that the Board of Regents is making?
You listen to them. As a girls' court judge, we deal with drug addicted, sexually abused girls who don't have role models, and we take them and build them up one by one, and we do it one girl at a time. So if we have to do this one student at a time, we got to start somewhere. My husband's a farmer. He says one shovel at a time. We can't give up. We've got to do it. We've got to listen to people. We've got to make them participate and be accountable.
Okay, thank you.
So just to follow up on this question and earlier question on the role with the regents and the administration, what do you think the role should be with the regents and the legislature? And do you think that there should be regular communications, or how do you see that?
I see it as not as successful as it can be. I would like to see more open exchanges, maybe in a less formal situation where people can let their hair down. Maybe not a drink in the Capitol property, but some kind of informal meet and greet. Um, we're all in it together, right? The reason we're all here in this room today is because we want our university to succeed.
Do you think it should be rest upon the chair of the regents to initiate these kinds of meetings or reaching out to the legislature to understand possibly where the legislature is coming from? Because, we do introduce measures, and there's usually reasons why those measures get introduced by members of the legislature regarding the university. And I don't necessarily know that board members have even reached out to myself or members of the committee, really asking us, why did you folks introduce this measure to not have the president, for example, the university, be the chief procurement officer? What is the issues that have concerned? And just to have an understanding, because a lot of times when these measures are introduced, they're sort of sending a message to the Board of Regents and the university that there's concerns that have been raised with us, and hope that you folks will take that as an indication that maybe you need to look into it instead of just sitting back and thinking, okay, well, we'll wait and see what the legislature does.
I think that's a lot of work to be able to just send a message. I think we all need to sit down and have talk story sessions. And yes, the chair does speak for the board, but it's also incumbent on the individual regents if they feel there's a communication breakdown to encourage the chair to open up lines of communication. I think it can come from anybody.
Do you think when those meetings occur, the chair meets with the legislature, that information or exchange should be shared with the rest of the board?
Yes.
Have you, in the 4 months that you've been there, had any of that kind of information shared with you?
Not in any formal setting, no.
How about an informal setting?
I think there's talk around the coffee pot on communication, wants and desires, and I encourage it. I encourage reaching out to the legislature.
So do we.
Do you think that that should be a consideration when selecting the new chair, which you will be doing in July, I believe, or end of June or beginning of July? That should be a consideration of who the chair might be.
I think the chair of any board, because that chair speaks for the board, needs to be an effective communicator.
Okay. And hopefully be able to feel comfortable reaching out to the legislature as well.
I think you need to reach out to all your stakeholders, whether it's some middle school kid who maybe wants to go to community college one day, or whether it's a Senate president, or whether it's the chair of the higher education committee.
And do you feel that you folks, I'm sorry, you folks, the regents have enough time to really look into and read up on some of the agenda items to give you enough time to get engaged? Because I know sometimes it's thrust upon you, there's a deadline, you need to make a decision. But in order for you to be more informed, you need some time to look into stuff. So do you feel that you folks have enough time, or you feel rushed having to make decisions?
I have felt rushed, and I kind of hit the ground running in January, and we get large packets of information. So, with my learning curve being a new regent and getting all this information, I feel like I have still a lot of questions, and I'm not comfortable with all aspects of university policy. I don't think anybody would be, even after a couple of years, probably. But I've also expressed that, for example, if we have to catch a plane at the end of a meeting because we may be meeting at a community college, I want to make sure that we have enough time to continue the conversation instead of leaving or finishing it abruptly. So I personally will be asking the administration to accommodate some of my concerns on timing.
what do you think that the administration can do better in order to get you folks prepared for these meetings? And if in fact you are thrust upon you to make a decision, a last minute decision, because they failed to give you the documents before a deadline, like we need this answer by next week, otherwise we're gonna be, I don't know what it is, we lose the contract, whatever. Would you be willing to say, hey, you didn't bring it to us on time, and we just don't feel comfortable in voting on this measure right now?
If I'm not comfortable voting on a measure because I didn't feel I had time to ask my questions, I would certainly ask for more time and not be expected to vote.
So you do feel you have the time and willingness to put into this so that you can make these decisions? Because I know you're not being paid to be on this board, and it does take a lot of time. Yeah, nobody told you it's for free.
It's a lot of time,
Yes,
and
it
I'm
is a
prepared for
commitment.
it. I'm
Good.
prepared for it.
I appreciate it. And I ask that because, I do make it a point to read the minutes, and I do try to watch the videos when I have a chance. And I do find that there are several members on the regions who don't seem engaged. They don't ask the questions. They seem very passive on their roles. Of course, they come into these confirmation hearings and they, say really good things, but in practice, I always say that, I'm not necessarily going to try to make sure that people do things that in keeping with what I believe, but they need to vet the issues. They need to ask the questions. They need to be engaged. And I can't understand when they don't, why would they want to serve on the Board of Regents? And so I just pose that to you because, we hope that you folks are vetting the issues. We hope that you're, holding the administration accountable, that you're challenging their answers. So,
I agree with you. I hope so too. Yeah, I think that's our job.
okay. So speaking of that, I wanted to ask you about the athletic independent assessment. And I did provide you with a copy of, I believe, 6 questions that was composed by the Attorney General and myself after a meeting with the chair of the Regents and the chair of the athletic committee regarding the athletic assessment that was discussed. Were these questions shared with you as a member of the Regents ahead of time?
I don't remember if these questions were shared with me, and I could have missed them, but we had quite a lengthy meeting last month about this issue and quite a lengthy executive session on the matter as well. So while I'm loath to be too specific about our deliberations, I can tell you I did walk away from that meeting feeling quite relieved that one of the concerns I had heard, and I had heard also the concern from you when we met earlier about the student athletes not feeling that they had an opportunity to speak privately with the interviewee. I was reassured more than once that the interviewees had an opportunity to either excuse people from the room who they did not want to have there, or to follow up in person and privately with the interviewer. So I felt quite relieved coming away from that meeting with the assurances that the interviewees had been given all opportunities to speak privately with the interviewer.
And who gave you that assurance?
More than one party.
I did watch the hearing. So was that discussed in the open hearing?
A part of it was discussed in the open hearing.
Okay. Were you have the opportunity to speak with some of the students that were in the meeting?
I have not spoken with any of the students personally, no.
So how would you then be assured then if you only heard from the administration, from the representative or the Mr. Schimmel, and department, I mean, that in fact that they were offered, because I had heard differently. I had heard they were not given an option. They were told they had to have somebody in the room.
That was not the information that I walked away from that meeting with. And I did not speak to any individual who was interviewed.
Okay, well,
And
yeah, and I think that's the concern, Ja, because when these issues are brought up, the administration will definitely say things or will represent that these things occurred, but then in practicality or in actuality, the students will claim different, or the faculty will claim differently that did not happen. And the only way you're going to get to the bottom of it is if you have all the people there or coming forward to actually tell you, no, it didn't take place. So,
point well taken.
okay. So was any of these questions ever discussed in the meeting or in executive session? Specifically?
There was a lengthy executive session, and we're trying not to parse in a public hearing today what was said in executive session and what was not.
Well, you don't have to tell me what exactly was said. I just want to know whether these question members, you do have a copy of the questions I provided. And let me just give a background. When the information regarding representatives from the administration was brought up to me, I had called Sports Solutions regarding it, and it also called and spoke and had a meeting with the athletic director and Mr. Matsunaga, and then subsequently a meeting with the board chair and the chair of the athletic committee, sports committee, of our concerns. And so these questions came as a result of a meeting with the board chair, and that the AG, the Attorney General, was present in the meeting, and it was decided because the chair at that point didn't feel comfortable answering some of the questions that was raised, that we would write these questions, and these questions would be posed to the board, and that they would be discussed, and then responses would be made. But my understanding that I've talked to other board members that felt that they said they did not get these questions, and so I'm not even sure who answered. Were you part of the discussion as to how these questions, the answers to these questions?
I was
As a
not
board
part of that discussion.
Do you think that the chair should have shared these questions with you folks?
I don't know. I don't know
Okay.
I don't think I have enough information to answer that completely.
So let me ask you about the first question, since you're an attorney. Was any action taken by the Board of Regents to extend the term of the University of Hawaii Agreement for services between the BOR and College Sports Solutions, commencing August 23rd, beyond its expiration of 90 days after the commencement of the contract? If not, why? And the answer was no action was taken by the board to extend the term of the University of Hawaii Agreement for services with CSS. Regular communications were maintained with CSS. Neither the board or the university had any reason to believe that CSS was not being diligent in pursuing its assignment. Therefore, an extension appeared to be unnecessary. In hindsight, a 60-day period for completion of the assessment was not a realistic expectation. Despite that, though, this is a contract, right? And the contract performance, time of performance, is actually spelled out by the board. And so this is a legal and binding contract. So the fact that this report came in, see, August, September, October, November, January, February, 6 to 7 months after this was signed, and this contract specifically says the delivery would be 60 days, unless there are certain circumstances, and that it could be extended for 30 days. The fact that the board or the chair of the board, who this says here, the due date for the report may be extended upon written mutual agreement of the university's chair of the Board of Regents and the contractor for an additional 30 days if additional time is required. And the fact that there were no extensions to a legal contract, as an attorney, how would you review? I mean, what is your thoughts about this?
It's probably not ideal. However, we did have, as I said, an extensive executive session. We also spoke with the contractor the principal of the contractor, and he has graciously offered to be available for further questions should the board have any.
But how do you protect the university if something like this occurs? And maybe in this case, they might have been, not contentious. But if the fact that there might be some concerns that this was not an independent assessment, that they really did not allow these interviewees to have the option of having somebody in there. They didn't feel that they could speak, and that they didn't feel that this contract, wouldn't something like that the fact that there were no extension made could make this contract null and void?
I think all your concerns are valid, and if indeed that were the case, it is of concern.
Okay, then the university has its own council, general counsel,
Correct.
and you have the board chair, and you have a legal contract from the University of Hawaii, which supposedly have all these legal school of law and so forth, that something like this would be dealt with so flippantly. I apologize if I use the wrong word, but offhandedly, like, oh no, we've been in contact with the parties, so we don't feel that we needed to have an extension. Yeah, it was 6 months late. Is that a practice that the University of Hawaii and the Board of Regents should be operating under?
I can't speak to any past practice.
But this is going on now.
Yeah.
Was this even discussed in your executive session that there was no extension?
I'm loath to speak in a public hearing as to what was discussed in executive session.
Okay, and then let's move on. So the last question on this is that, have you, CSS, investigated or whether any of the staff or students felt intimidated by the presence of the third person? And they said no such investigations were conducted. And then it says, if no, do you think that you or the Board of Regents should complete such an investigation? And the answer, and I'm not sure who wrote this, such investigations are not necessary, as it was made clear to all interviewers that if they preferred to be interviewed without the presence of other persons, they could do so. In all instances in which the interviewers requested an interview without the presence of another person, that request was granted without question. Was that, again, is this something that was discussed in open public? And who this represents the Board of Regents, these answers. So who decided that such investigation is not necessary? Would you know that?
This was discussed, and I'm sorry, again, I don't remember if it was discussed only in executive session or an open session, but I did have this question in my mind based on what I had heard in the community. And I came away from that meeting with the same understanding that those who asked to be interviewed without any other parties present was given that opportunity. So
you feel like you didn't have to speak to anybody, any of the other?
I didn't feel that way. And, I don't know at what point do we question what information is given to us. Obviously, some of it is going to be a learned behavior. I'm probably just too new to have that kind of experience or knowledge.
Did you watch the video from that hearing we had with Coach Graham in the athletic department?
I watched a part of it.
Okay. Okay. So there were a lot of concerns raised there by the students and the parents and so forth. And so this assessment, independent assessment, came about because of that incident, and then the concerns raised after the fact or during that whole period that other sports student athletes were sharing with us same situations, the same concerns that they had. And so this independent assessment, it was looked upon as a way to bring out some of those incidents and how would we solve it. And yet it seemed like it missed the mark. Would you say that?
I don't have enough information to say that it missed the mark, but again, as I had said before, this is a open and public process. And if anybody has any complaints or concerns, I think it is incumbent on them to reach out to a regent or reach out to the administration, reach out to the board. I think the reason we have so many regions scattered throughout the state is so that you can have a friendly face in the supermarket or whatever that you can express your concerns to.
Okay. However, many of these individuals feel threatened. They feel their scholarships could be revoked. Faculty, they don't want to speak up because they don't trust the system, and they come to us and they ask us to keep their names anonymous. And I tell them that there is a whistleblower, they're not comfortable. I tell them to go to the Board of Regents. They don't trust the people sitting on those positions and feel that there is retaliation. And even more so to hear that representatives of the administration were sitting in this meeting, and specifically Joe Matsunaga, who is a representative or have been part of the athletic department, part of an assistant. What does he call himself? I forget what he said on the video. But yeah, that he is part of the athletic department, and he was the person that have reached out to me to make meetings, set up meetings for Mr. Matlin. And so, and this whole assessment had to do with the athletic department and the AD. So that raises a lot of concerns if they're the ones that are assessing that these people were given the opportunity to resist, because according to what I was told was that the CSS students were told that somebody had to sit in. And Mr. Matsunaga said that he sat in all the meetings, and when they resisted, they said, well, okay, then you can have the FAR. But they insisted that somebody be in there. So again, hearing that side of it and then hearing what was said in the hearings raises my concern. And if you were to walk away thinking just on those assertions that in fact there's not an issue, I guess I have concerns with that.
And I understand why you would. And I think the issue of retaliation is a serious one, and having some experience with that in my private practice, I know it is a strong sword. So that is not a situation that anybody should feel like they're in. I don't know what else to say other than, we have regents who should not be beholden to anybody but their own conscience. And if there are concerns, I think I can speak for all of my colleagues, some of whom I've only known for a very short period of time, that they take it to heart. I have not heard anything to the contrary.
Okay, and I guess that's what the question about whether or not there should be a decision to look into it further with an investigation of whether or not, in fact, you are getting all of the information. And there's no way you're going to know that unless such an investigation or more discussions and bringing people will take place before that determination can be actually made that yes, people felt comfortable. Because other than that, this assessment that we paid almost $60,000 for is not an independent assessment. It was a waste of money and time and a facade.
I understand your concern.
Okay, members, my questions?
Just one follow-up, and then I have a couple other questions. It just kind of brought to my remembrance of that incident when we had the families and the players and all of this whole thing, and it wasn't for the consistency of this committee going forward, the Board of Regents wasn't gonna lift a finger. But it was sad to say that one of the individuals on the video, they lose her scholarship due to the, I don't like to use the word retaliation, but when we send our kids off to college, whether they're playing sports or not, same with high school, we're under the impression that we're going to have them being treated and respected on the highest level, because they should be, because they're going there to that's one of the reasons, that's not one of the reasons why I never go, I just didn't go. But anyway, the main reason why I bring this up is that I'm listening to Senator Ken, and I know you still new, and I pray that, as one of the new members, if you do go through, that we can see some changes, because the previous same old is not happening to our kids. Our kids are getting damaged. They're going there with their life dreams being crushed because they feel that they're going to turn to an adult, and later on that adult turn on them, and they have nowhere else to go. Listening to one parent on the TV of a Polynesian ancestry father, pretty much in tears, what happened to their son. And then to have the president of the university say that we was cherry picking the people. That's the people who was on there. There was no cherry picking. But having a president, and I'm gonna bring this up because I have, my own issues, but I just want to bring up just the situation that happened with that. Having the president of the university having that kind of animosity towards maybe the committee and the way the thing was being handled, to have that kind of animosity instead of having compassion, caring, all of that. First thing came out of his mouth that he was cherry picking everything and tried to make it like we were setting people up. These are people that didn't feel comfortable opening up to anybody else at the time that they could trust. So going forward, as you being on the Board of Regents, going forward, and get recommendations like that. And, sad to say, my colleagues was asked a question, how they felt about the performance for the president of the university. So they asked it truthfully, and then in the newspaper and the news, they twisted all around. Because that's not what they said when they talked to because I know I'm part of the group. But then nobody came back and say, oh, sorry, we misprinted. It all went that is Senator Kim and the rest of my colleagues was being bullies and was attacking poor president from the university. But when the president attacked our poor children, you see nobody coming. You see what I'm saying? I depend, I don't know about my other colleagues, that the region going to do justice for the students, for the college, because I hear you how much love and respect for your higher institution of learning. But not everybody had that turnaround. And like you said, this day and age is totally different. So as you coming from that perspective and the kids are coming from a different perspective, as a Board of Regent, what can you do to bring that? I'm not asking for everybody else. I just gonna ask you because for us, everybody else will get kind of muddy up like the media calling my colleagues bullies. I like to know for you, what would you do in that circumstance that came to you with these students and issues? How would you have handled it as a Board of Regents? How would you have handled what had happened to those kids and parents during the athletic fiasco at the university? How would you have handled it if you was there at that time?
I think I would probably want to speak or hear from all sides independently. Part of my career path has been as a professionally trained mediator. I've gone to specific training as a mediator, and we're taught to keep an open mind and listen to all sides. And whether, like I said, it's a middle school student or the president of the university, everybody's perception is important. And that middle schooler is going to grow up one day to be maybe a lawmaker or somebody. But I think just because somebody has initials after their name, like CEO or PhD, it doesn't make their testimony any more real than anybody else's.
Totally agree. So the next question I have.
Can I-
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so having said that, the fact that you weren't here when all of that happened, but you're here now with this assessment. And again, this assessment does not necessarily reflect what happened with the students. And how would you know and feel comfortable if you haven't heard from them? And you're only hearing from one side now with this voluminous document that to me said really nothing about everything that went on in that video. So these students felt threatened and afraid. So do you think that they would have shared this information with somebody sitting in the room with them? Does that sound logical?
Yeah, I don't know, but Senator, I hear your concerns. I can put two and two together, and I'm going to have an opinion on this, and I will discuss it with the appropriate people.
Go ahead.
So just like I told President Lasner, yeah, what happens here in the committee and whatever information that, again, I tell this to a lot of the people that I talk to in hearings, just like with you. Don't take anything that we're doing or saying personal. Sometimes, I'm not saying he does it all the time. Sometimes we thinking we're just attacking him, but we just like questions be answered to us because the community is asking us. It's not our questions. We're not trying to break him and rip him apart. And I just told him that a couple of hearings ago to please not to take it personal because it's nothing that we do here. Not for me and not my colleagues. I've been with them for over 4 years now. Ever seeing them being any vindictive or attackful. And same like with everybody else, everybody else on TV land listening, none of the things that we do here is attackful. We're just trying to get the best questions for the university because we love our university too. I love Westwall a little bit more, but you know what I'm saying. But the bottom line is we want our kids to feel comfortable. And it's not like we're trying to scold the president or bully the president or anything like that. We have deep concerns. And if we don't do our job, then why people elect us into office? We just try to do the best things that were happening. And I'm just speaking for me now, for me to try to do my job the best way I can. And then later on, to be called from the 5th floor names, bullies, and then the media use their own words. Never in my life you guys ever want to hear me call somebody a witch. Yeah, I don't use those kinds of words. But it was in the media. Even when we asked them to correct things, do they apologize? Do they go back and say, we apologize, we misquoted, ripping Senator Kim on some stuff, and then later on, she didn't say that, but they don't correct or come back and correct it.
Okay, what's the question?
So anyway, so the question is, would you support modifying the Board of Regents appointing process to allow the governor to directly appoint regents and not requiring the governor to appoint the candidates from the list of names required from the candidate advisory council?
I personally, have gone through that process because that's the process we have now. I thought it worked. I could be convinced otherwise, but I felt that the process that I went through was a fair one, and carried with it, some serious questions of my desires and intentions.
The reason why is that what Senator Kim was saying, like when we have certain bills that concerning maybe the university or the Board of Regents that was introduced this year to repeal the requirements of the governors only appointing the pool of candidates presented by the Candidate Advisory Council. The Board of Regents did not take a position on the bill and only said that they had not an opportunity to discuss the matter. So I don't know how long you was there, if you was even there when this bill came up. These are the stuff that I guess Senator Kim is talking about and we are talking about when it coming to the interactions with the regent and the legislators, because these are the stuff that our constituents call and ask, even like when I wanted to have the separation of the chancellor, the president, and the chief procurement officer all in one, because that person only talks to themselves. So I don't know if you use 3 mirrors at the same time, but those things are very serious when you're talking to taxpayers' money. You know what I mean? When they made that decision of the $6 million bill, or $6 million for the stadium, I will tell you guys right now, I am not an engineer, but I'm in construction. When I went there, I told my two colleagues, this stadium is not safe. They rushed it through. Somebody had ended up dying. They rushed the whole thing. They get cables and pins are holding the stadium bleachers together.
He's talking about Chinfield.
Ching Stadium. Not a stadium, I don't know what happened. You gotta talk to the stadium authority. But anyway, Ching Stadium. So when I went there, you know, those pilot, it's called pilot, scaffold jacks. Get on thing, you spin like this, get thread, goes up. It's connected, it's drilled down. Pilot, this scaffold
To
jacks.
the question. I'm sorry.
Question is, the scaffold jacks wasn't even placed good. The decision to make on his own is why I question that. Going forward, you guys would have a more active role in the decision on going with the procurement when it comes to any kind of projects like that. Looking into it more closely as we go moving forward. If you go through as advice and consent, to look more into how President Lazaner had made the decision on his own and question it. Just raising it to question, bring it to one of the meetings. Going forward, would you guys consider to look into that kind of stuff more closely?
Obviously, this is a matter of public health and safety, so I would think that if the regions had specific concerns such as those you raised and reasons, valid reasons for those concerns, it's incumbent on us to ask those.
Well, more so the procurement, sorry. I mean, I went off the ball and thanks to Senator Campo, gave me a left hook, so go back the other way. I go into public safety. I'm just talking about procurement changes from $1 million or something like that to ending project almost 6 million or something like that. It was a big change and they had to use two different kind of funds. So they went from one fund, then they have to use another set of funds because they changed the procurement drastic. If something like that happened, would you guys call it to question, to ask the president of that situation, of the change of the scope of the project?
I think something like that is a substantial change, so the region should be concerned with substantial changes.
But they weren't. I guess that's a concern that was raised and somebody did buy. I'm saying that because there was a change, but that's one of the reasons why the legislature and members and myself introduced a resolution, a bill to say that the chief procurement officer should not be the same as the president, because there is no other campus we could find in the United States that had the chief procurement officer being the president. And at our procurement task force, the president did say, when we questioned him about that, he says, well, I'm the president of the university and I have to do what's in the best interest of the university. And I said, therein lies the problem, because as a chief procurement officer, you have to take off the president hat, you have to put on the procurement hat. And if it's a violation, which there definitely was a violation because they expanded the scope, that it shouldn't have been allowed. So how does a president make that decision when clearly feels that as a president, he needs to do what's best for the university? And I agree with him. But then they fight that bill. The number 2, 3 times we've introduced the measure, they've come in with testimony opposing that bill.
I think if a CEO has authority, that's one thing, legal authority. What is the fine line between $1 over your authority or not? But I think a smart CEO would know, it's like pornography, right? You know it when you see it. What's a substantial change? You kind of know it when you see it. You want to keep your board happy, you keep them in the loop on anything substantial. I don't need to know the day-to-day, a $15 change in a contract item, but I do want to know about the substantial things.
But they don't tell you guys. It wasn't just a change in the money, but it was an increase in scope, which is a violation of the procurement law. Clear violation.
And I understand your concerns.
Thank you.
I had a question about UH West Oahu, but I forgot what it
Okay,
was.
well, let me go. Let me go forward then. Since we're talking about sports, in the governance, page 6 on governance for New Era, it says here, trustees must be willing to withstand pressure to grow athletic programs that are a net drain on resources. They should ensure that salary contract for coaches reward academic performance first and athletic success second. It is critical for trustees to actively oversee their intercollegiate athletic programs rather than allow outside organizations such as the NCAA and athletic conferences to dictate governance prerogatives. Would you agree with that?
For me, and obviously not being an athlete or a student athlete, academics comes first. And I probably offend a lot of people in athletics, but to me, athletics comes secondary to academic success.
Okay, I guess I want to focus more on the last sentence where it says, rather than allow outside organizations such as the NCAA and athletic conferences to dictate governance, because that's the whole reason Ching Field is being expanded. That's the whole reason why we're spending $35 million to expand Ching Field temporarily, because NCAA says you have to have 15,000 seats. And instead of trying to get a waiver, which the board did not choose to do, even though one of the board members brought it up, or ask whether or not Murakami Stadium could be used, which other universities have done, the board chose to spend $35 million and let the athletic facilities continue to deteriorate and our student housing continue to deteriorate. But the primary focus and priority obviously is Ching Field, which is what I asked you in the beginning. What are the 3 top priorities? And none of that seems to be Ching Field, but yet these other areas have taken the back seat, all in the essence of allowing the NCAA to dictate to us what should happen.
And I don't know all the thought processes that went into that decision. I'm sure there were many that I am not aware of. I think, the regents and the administration have to look at each project as a whole, and it could be a moving target. I don't know, but what's best for the university, I think, depends on what the project is and what are the competing interests. But as I stated, my interest is academics.
And then my last question isn't really your answer, but your question. So as Senator Favela also pointed out that, we on the committee are really looking after our students. And I think the best interest of the students, for me, is number one. And the policy that the regents have, Regent Policy 9.214, which I think we discussed, says instruction is the university's highest priority. Instruction. Teaching remains the most important duty of the faculty. And this policy sets standards for the assignment of the instructional component of faculty responsibilities, which Senator Kidani had talked about earlier. That says that a full-time instructional faculty at Manoa has to do 24 credit hours. Well, not just Manoa, but the 4-year campuses. Manoa, Hilo, West Oahu, 24 semester credit hours and 27 for community college. But it's an undocumented rule of thumb that they are given 3 credit hours exemption for service, another 3 credit hours equivalency for research, which leaves 18 credit hours, which is fine. I can live with that. But then there's another caveat. Additional reductions awarded by the discretion of the department chair, which is a faculty member that rotates and varies by department. Anything from clinical, advising, tutoring, non-research objectives. Chairs have the authority to grant reductions for other teaching activities that are not listed in their teaching workload credit equivalency tables. And as a result, the average faculty teaching load at Manoa is 8 to 12 credit hours. So if teaching is UH's main mission, shouldn't the faculty be expected to be teaching their undergraduates at a higher percentage than 8 to 12 credit hours, shouldn't it be at least 15 to 18 credit hours, even though the policy says 24?
I apologize. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay,
It's
well,
an
just,
important question.
Yeah.
But I don't have.
well, okay, just so you understand, so if you're the regent policy, which you are a regent, said they should be teaching 24 credit hours, and they're only teaching 8 to 12. Just on that pure fact, not anything on equivalency. How do you feel about that?
I feel it should be higher.
Okay, and when it's not, then we have to hire 2 professors, then you have to pay 2 fringe costs. So then the cost of higher education goes up, right? The cost of tuition, which is borne by the students, go up because now they have to have 2 professors to teach the class, 24 credit hours than 1, right? And then they have, of course, graduate assistants that the students are paying for these high-paying professors to teach them, but they get delegated to a graduate assistant. So if the equivalencies are being given for everything, all kinds of things, and we're only ending up with 8 to 12 credit hours, then that would be a concern.
It's a concern. It's something that I'm aware of and I have read about in some
Okay,
literature.
and that's something that you will hopefully pursue and look into.
Something I
As a
am
regent.
very aware of.
Okay, then the other question is, should it be the department chair that grants equivalencies, or should it be the department chair, the deans of the college that gives the equivalencies? Because right now, the equivalencies are given by the rotating department chairs who happen to be a fellow faculty member versus a dean. And therein lies some of the conflicts in granting these equivalencies. So do you have a thought about that?
My thought is, it is a concern and I don't have enough information to address it.
Would you be willing to bring it up though at a regents meeting to discuss it? Because I think this goes to, for myself, this goes down to the student level, which means they have to pay more tuition. Also affects the legislative budget where we could be giving monies in other areas, but we're having to pay basically double professors' pay because they're not doing their full load.
I think it's a huge concern. I just don't know all the issues involved.
I know Regent Motoyoshi brought this up and was one of her top priorities, and then she got termed out on the regents, and then that was never brought up again. And we've brought up resolutions, and I know that the university is looking into how to systematize or make it across the board that all the different department and colleges follow the same criteria when giving equivalencies out, because each college have their own method of doing that, and it's not consistent across the board.
Right.
But so that's one problem, consistency. But the other problem is whether or not some of these rise to the level of being given equivalencies when their main job is teaching. And yes, we're a research university, but still teaching is the highest priority, right? And that, again, when we talked about priorities, the highest priority is the teaching.
Instruction.
Yes, and instruction. So I hope that rises up to that level as you go forward.
It had to do with West Oahu's,
Identity.
yeah, what their identity is and also their enrollment numbers. And I don't know how much you know about UH West Oahu. But, I think, some of the things that have been lax would be they let their nursing program go at a time when, thinking now we could really use those programs. But I don't see where the university and the regents are looking at those issues that are impacting our students most. If you're not getting the number of students that you normally would have, what's the reason? Is that, across all campuses? I don't think so. But the programs that were designated for UH West Oahu are not happening. So, the students that would have gone are not going. So I think those are some of the issues that have to be looked at.
So
one last thing. I know I said that was going to be the last one. But again, going back to the governance new era, page 16, it says individual board members must take the opportunity to visit the campus and become familiar with buildings, administration, faculty, students, and campus life. They must make attendance at board meetings and careful advanced preparation for meetings as a priority. And I know we talked about preparing in advance, but are you able and have the time to visit the different campuses, and not just when you folks have a board meeting, but I know we've done visits like to West Oahu, and it was like a ghost town. There's nobody there. The
Including the
chancellor,
chancellor.
the chancellor, the brand new science building is empty. We spent all that money on that building, and yet we're asking for, more monies for other campuses. We are leasing out space for UH is leasing out space for Outreach College, the medical school, when we have all this room at West Oahu. So is that something that you think you'll be able to do? I know you're in Kauai, so it might be a little bit harder.
I'm on Kauai. Of course, I'm very familiar with Kauai Community
Right.
College, and I'm taking classes there at night, etc. I've now finally had an opportunity to visit all of our campuses with our meeting on West Oahu a couple of months ago, which is a beautiful campus,
Right.
and Maui last night. So I finally seen all the campuses. And
Was
Yes,
the
I have.
chancellor there? Did you tell her you were coming? Was she there?
yeah, I don't tell anybody.
No,
when I
West
visit on
Oahu.
my own.
West Oahu.
That there was a presentation with not only the chancellor, but the student group and the faculty group and the administrative staff. So they did a great
You
job.
should try going unannounced.
Well, one of the things I understand from principals of the various schools on the west side is that the chancellor, has not like reached out to the various schools to, welcome students to come to the school, et cetera, like I think other chancellors do. And I think that's part of the missing link in more ways than one.
Finally, I just want to ask you if you will look into looking up this Regent resolution back from June 2018. And this resolution was supporting the moratorium square footage growth. University of Hawaii Board of Regents resolution supporting moratorium on square footage, whereas the University of Hawaii system has deferred maintenance backlog of 742 million for general and special funded facilities, both on and off campus. So my understanding is this resolution was passed back in 2018, and that a resolution continues into infinity unless you folks do something. In the resolution, it says that it would be reviewed within 3 years. I don't believe it was ever reviewed. And so I would be interested into knowing what the Regents' policy is on moratorium on square footage and growth, because there was talk about buying St. Francis, there was talk about other things, and that would definitely be the conflict with this resolution. And so new board members may not be aware of some of these existing resolutions that are out there, but I think it'd be interesting to have the Regents bring this up as to what is their policy regarding the new square footage. And again, and what is that backlog? Is it still 742 million of backlog maintenance? Was that ever discussed during your budget that you were there?
Not that I remember, but actually I am a facilities person, so I'm going to be asking to sit on facilities.
Good. Yes, because that is a concern regarding the backlog on that and the dormitories that seem to be falling apart. We talked to the students.
Understood.
So
And I dormed when I was there, so
it's probably the
I have
same
a-
dorms that you were in.
they're just 40 years older.
Exactly. It's like our high school is the same buildings when we were there. So, okay, if there are no other questions from you, thank you very much. We will do decision making after, but we will take up on our second region now. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to Governor's Message number 601, submitting for consideration and confirmation to the Board of Regents, University of Hawaii gubernatorial nominee Abigail how do you say the last name? Mawai, not Mawai. Not Mawai. Okay. For a term to expire 6/30/2024. and testifiers in support. The only person that was going to do it was Randy Moore in person, which he already did. And we have 6 others, all in support of your nomination. So with that, we welcome you to give it a remarks.
Okay, thank you.
She is the student regent.
Thank you, Chair Kim, Vice Chair Kidani, and members of this committee. It's an honor to be here. I'd like to say a quick thank you to my brother Kirkland and grandparents Linda and David Mawai, who flew here to support me today, and to my parents who are not here, but who support, encourage, and pray for me every day. My family has encouraged me in every endeavor, and they are my biggest cheerleaders and my wisest counsel. And I cannot ever give them enough thanks. It is an honor, privilege, and gift to be a Mawai. To my friends and mentors who have submitted testimony on my behalf, who share my vision for the University of Hawaii, who have taken my phone calls and pointed me in the right direction and offered their wisdom and guidance. Mahalo. And mahalo to you for considering me for the position as student regent. I'm a proud graduate of the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where I was also a student athlete for the Rainbow Wahine swimming team, and some of my past teammates are here supporting me as well. Upon graduation, I had the opportunity to serve in the United States Senate working on education and anti-human trafficking legislation. During that time, I made the decision to return to Hawaii to attend William S. Richardson School of Law. I'm here today because I feel I have a valuable voice to offer the board. As a graduate of Manoa, a former student athlete, a current law student, and a Native Hawaiian woman, I'm able to speak on behalf of students who have never had representation in these meetings. If I'm confirmed, I'm humbled that it will now be my responsibility to speak on behalf of every student throughout the University of Hawaii system, and it's not a responsibility to be taken lightly. Committee, mahalo for your time, consideration, and dedication to our university, and for allowing me to sit before you today.
Abigail, thank you very much. Members, I don't know if you've watched any or sat in on any of the board meetings, but I really want to condemn.
Oh, no.
Commend you, say that again, commend you for not being just a passive student regent, because a lot of the student regents come on with deer in headlights, and you have been certainly involved and engaged, and you've asked a lot of very good questions. So I'm sure you will be able to answer all of my questions here. I will be repeating some of my questions that I did earlier. So just so that,
Yeah.
the same opportunity to respond.
Of course.
But being that you are a student athlete, were a student athlete, maybe continue to be a student athlete, what are your thoughts about the athletic independent assessment? I know you were very vocal in the board meeting,
Yeah.
so perhaps you can share that with
Yeah.
my colleagues.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, definitely a former student athlete, no longer. But it is a title I'm proud to hold. And I think that my responses in the meetings in the past since January have been pretty clear, is that my goal to be on this board is to elevate necessary student voices, whether that's undergrad or athletes or law students or graduates. I know I don't hit all of the boxes, but it is my goal to bring those voices into our meetings. So I think regarding the independent assessment, what I've said in the meetings, I will repeat here today, is I think it's worth looking into continuing investigating, the process that went into doing this investigation, meeting with students. I personally have talked to students who said that there were other people in the room. They didn't have a choice. And I've brought that up in meetings. This is not new information to anyone.
You say you brought in meetings even in the board?
In the board meeting, yes, ma'am. And I've said it very publicly. There are students that have told me that they had other people in the room. And so I think that it's worth our time as a board to really look into this. This assessment was $60,000, and it told us that nothing was wrong. That is not what I'm hearing from students, student athletes. And that quite honestly wasn't my experience as a student athlete either. We, as an athletic department, can follow all NCAA rules and follow every and not break any laws, and we can still have issues. And I think that that's what we're still experiencing. You know, the investigation stated at the end that we weren't breaking rules, we weren't violating any NCAA procedures, and there were no like state or federal laws being broken. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other issues that need to be addressed. And so hopefully our board continues to see the importance in investigating, talking to students, and providing ways where students don't feel like they're going to be retaliated against, and also faculty that work in admin that have been very involved in this procedure. So,
How were your questions or concerns that you raised in the board meetings? How was that taken by your fellow colleagues? And obviously, from watching what I saw and from the press releases that came out, none of that seemed to have affected them in any way.
I mean, I think that there were some regents who had said in those board meetings that they were concerned that student athletes were saying that there were other people in the meetings. But I think, you know, when talking to, forgive me, I forget his name, the guy that did the investigation, Schimmel. He assured me that there were no other people unless those people consented to another representative being in those meetings. He assured me that that wasn't the case, and I told him that student athletes were telling me. So obviously there's one truth, and I happen to believe the student athletes because they were in those meetings and they were talking to me. But you know, I think that's a point of clarification. And if people were forced to be in those meetings, who I believe was Joel Matsunaga, I think that needs to be addressed. And I think it you know, gives some light to maybe why the investigation could have, you know, not resulted in anything. But yeah, I think it's really concerning to have, you know, spent so much time investigating and finding no wrongdoing, but also not having any, you know, ways that we can, I guess, actively improve on the athletic department. It's a concern.
So the CSS, that's the group of student athletes.
The SAC, Student Athlete Advisory Committee.
And it was said by Mr. Schimmel in that video of the meeting that at least 2 members from each sport that was in that meeting.
Right.
And that meeting took place in February.
Yes, it did.
And his report came out in February.
Yes.
And he didn't meet with them individually. He met
No.
with them as a group. Do you know how long that meeting was?
That meeting was approximately 10 minutes.
Okay, so he met with, I don't know, 20-something student athletes that represented all of the sports. When the question was raised whether he only focused in on football, and he said, no, we had this meeting. But
Yeah.
to meet with all of them for 10 minutes, and my understanding was that he did most of the talking. So
Yes.
he didn't get any response from the students. And it was done in February when he was actually writing his report, when actually his contract came about in August.
Yeah.
And he had that whole 6-7 months when it was supposed to be 60 days. And I don't know how he could have even followed up on those students' responses when in actuality, he was drafting the report as he spoke to them.
Yes.
So I don't know, again, I mean, maybe I don't have a PhD, I can't comprehend this, but how does one actually have an independent assessment with just that alone as a fact? The fact that whether they agreed to have Joe Matsunaga or the FAR sit in the meeting, the fact that there were like 20 of them, 10 minutes as a group.
Yeah. Right.
I mean,
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not familiar with all of the ways that they conducted the investigation. I can only tell you that what you said is accurate about that meeting with SAC, and that they did not have very much time to concern or to relay their concerns to him, as well as the fact that the FAR ended up sitting in their meeting, who directly reports to the president. So there are a lot of concerns, and I think that it's not unreasonable for our board to be asking these questions about athletics. It's not unreasonable to, you know, really think that we need a more independent assessment, you know, not one that may be somehow connected to our athletic department or people within our athletic department.
do you think that the region should withhold payment to Sports Solution at this point in time until such things can be worked out about whether they really did interview the SAC and the student athletes, and whether or not, in fact, legally, that there isn't even a contract because there was no extension and it didn't use the time of performance that's in the contract. All of those concerns.
Well, I'm not a licensed attorney, so my legal advice,
But whether it's a
right.
legal issue or not, the fact
Right.
that as a member of the Board of Regents, isn't that something that should be raised with general counsel in such executive session, that this should be done? Because again, we have this company that is saying it was done independently, and just what little facts that I know of raises concern. It raises the concern of the Attorney General, who generated these issues and told me that
Right.
she shared some of those concerns.
I definitely think it needs to be brought up in our board meetings, and it needs to be a conversation, a discussion between our board members, and not just, for our chair to decide, because this does affect so many people that's not just, once it's student athletes, it's admin, it's faculty that work in in athletics. So I think it's a discussion that needs to be had.
Does it concern you about the way in which the search for the new athletic director is coming about? Again, this all surrounds a day-to-day operation, but these are issues that have been brought up in the newspaper by former coaches, former athletes, current athletes, saying that they question whether or not two coaches should be on this panel. Who they're going to pick their boss, who's going to set their salaries for one. Two, that it wasn't representative of the student athletes as far as diversity, and that it's not really been transparent. So, and being that shouldn't the region somehow talk about this or like open meeting about this?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's vital to our athletic success to pick an appropriate athletic director who is very well versed in athletics, but who is capable of running a Division I program. And it should be in the interest of the board, I believe, to decide that. I don't know all of the policies and procedures in our authority to decide it, but I do think, and I voiced my opinion, is that student athletes should be represented in some way. At least their concerns from the past athletic director should be presented in those committee meetings. So I'm not completely familiar with all of the ways that committee is going about it, but I think it is of vital concern for our board going forward with what has happened with athletics, and student athlete voices should be heard in those committee meetings with what they believe they need in an athletic director.
Should the current athletic director, who has announced that he will be leaving, be asked to refrain from making any new appointments at this point until the new athletic director come on board?
It's not something that I've considered, and I'm not fully aware if he's been, continuing or what his role still is up until his retirement. So I feel like that's a question that's kind of hard for me to answer. I don't know all the day-to-day operations of the athletic administration.
Will you ask that question in the board?
But I can bring it up.
Because the fact that outgoing, and if you sign contracts and then the 3-5-year contracts for coaches, then when the new athletic director come on board, they wouldn't have that opportunity to know what went into all of that. So certainly that's concerns have been raised to me. Concerns have also been raised, and I bring this up because you are from student athletes, is that a number of the athletic staff, namely women in the athletic staff, have been passed over for positions and promotions, and that instead they have selected putting in interim positions of people that did not meet any of the but the minimum qualifications, and that allowed them to stay there for a year or 2 years to get those minimum qualifications, and then they were hired permanently and then promoted, while other longtime staff members or more experienced athletic staff members were passed over. Is that something that have been raised?
Those concerns have been raised to me either privately or through other conversations, but I'm not exactly sure, which positions you're talking about, and I also don't know, what is our board oversight on those things and who's hiring, which to my understanding is the athletic director's role to hire those positions. But we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, and I think that we have some amazing women administrators in our athletic department that have helped me and have helped my fellow teammates and have supported us and encouraged us. And I would like for them to continue to be there, to continue to have roles to support our women's athletic department and our teams. But I'm not sure exactly what as a board where that line is between, having direct influence over those hiring roles or not. So,
Well, of course, the athletic director has the final say on everything. But if it's not a fair process, and we hope that there's going to be a fair process, right? And I think that's all anybody asks for. And with Title IX out there. So if in fact it's not a fair process, isn't that something you think the Board of Regents should be looking into? I mean, whether or not, ultimately, that's what the Board of Regents, right?
right. Yeah. It's definitely concerning to hear, and something that our board should be in touch with and should be discussing.
Questions?
Yeah, just a follow-up on that. For these positions that Senator Kim is talking about, you think these great women that's coaching or in the athletic department would even think about applying for athletic director position, knowing the atmosphere of the athletic department? Because I didn't recall seeing any of the candidates being women. Did you see if there was any ladies or women that was candidates? There was one?
I haven't been made aware of that list that has been, if the committee has put that together. I'm not aware of that.
Members, I have to apologize, and I have to apologize to you. Apparently, they want us to wrap up by 2:45, and I don't want to not give you the full opportunity to respond to questions. Are you able to come back on Thursday at 1 p.m.?
At what time?
1 p.m. this Thursday?
I can, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we have a board meeting, so I'd have to, on Thursday.
What time, how long does it go?
It goes pretty much all day.
Okay. We would need another time. When would you be available?
I'd have to look at my schedule, with classes.
Well, we, as long as we do this before the end of session, which we have a time, so perhaps we can.
Yeah, we can
staff it, or
reschedule.
when you can reschedule. to
Yeah.
come Back and continue with our questions.
Yeah.
Members are in any opposition to doing that? Yeah. Because I think you give a wealth of information, and we certainly want to be able to talk more with you about this.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So we will go ahead and adjourn at this point, and we will post a notice, and then at that time have you come back, and then we'll do decision making. I'm sorry? We have to adjourn because we have to put on a new, you don't have a plan to set, so we have to adjourn.
What is all the, who's gonna take the decision for
We're gonna make.
both
decision-
of them?
Yeah, at that time.
Okay,
Okay, so if that's the case,
Okay,
thank you very much.
thank you.
Appreciate you coming in.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, we are adjourned.